Welcome back. As we know, today is the first day of phase 2 of the reopening of the country. And as we navigate what is being termed as the new normal, how are you feeling? Some of you may be thinking about your financial commitments and how you're going to manage, while others might have become attached to the honeymoon period of calm, which is now over as we return to the fast-paced life. Or will it necessarily be this way, as some people have already begun to consider continuing working from home? What is this new normal, and are we taking our current low numbers for granted, which can threaten to send us down a spiraling path? These are just some of the few issues that I'll be speaking about with Dr. Peter Weller, community clinical psychologist, and recently co-chair of the Disaster Mental Health Committee of the Caribbean Alliance of Dr. Weller. Good morning. Of the Caribbean Alliance of National Psychological Association. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you and to the TTT family.
So, Dr. Weller, tell us, are there lessons to be learned from previous pandemics or world epidemics, such as HIV, for example, with regard to what we're going through now and the fact that we may see ourselves, if we don't take too much care, ending up in a more precarious position?
Yes, well, I think the lessons from HIV certainly are applicable in some aspects. We want to prevent a large second wave. Let us be careful about managing our expectations in this new normal. So with regard to HIV, I think one of the things that we learn is that with any pandemic like this, we have to have a balance between making people aware without making them so afraid that they avoid dealing with things. Mm-hmm. So that's why these programs are so important. Yes. Now, with HIV, there are some messages that were very critical. One was you can't tell by looking. And I think that is the issue that is most relevant with regard to the COVID-19 pandemic. You can't tell by looking. Most of the people who are infected will be either asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. So you can't protect yourself by only looking out for people who are coughing or sneezing or looking sick, because most of the people who will be transmitting this, you cannot tell by looking, which means that you have to protect yourself in all instances. The biggest difference, I think, between the HIV epidemic and this pandemic is that with HIV, you were not at risk from social contact, whereas with COVID-19, social contact, being in the same space, is what will put you at risk. Yeah. This is why safe spacing, which is what I call it, some call it social distancing or physical distancing, are very important. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing about this new normal is as with HIV and sexuality, there's a lot of resistance to the strategies that have to be used. What seemed very normal before, using no condom, etc., had to become normal. Therefore, it took practice. It took multiple different types of messaging with all organizations and agencies working together. With regard to COVID, we're going to have to do the same thing to create social norms for this new normal. It's going to take a lot of peer pressure. It's going to take a lot of organizations working together. So there are lots of similarities. Unfortunately, the one similarity that we hope does not apply is that there's still no vaccine for HIV. There is still no known cure. There are ways that people living with HIV have been treated so that they can live longer and healthier lives. Mm-hmm. With COVID-19, 20 plus years, there's still no vaccine for HIV. Yeah. Hopefully COVID-19, we will find a vaccine, but there's no guarantee. And so we really have to create a new norm that will allow us to all live happy lives while still maintaining safe spacing.
Let's talk about this new normal a little bit. I spoke about the psychological issues that might be, coming to the fore right now. You have some persons who are saying, I enjoyed the tranquility, I enjoyed the calm that, that was happening, and now it's going back to this fast pace. Am I going back to this fast paced life? You have those who are going through the anxiety, though, of not being able to go to work so that they are unable to pay their bills, or they have the anxiety of how am I going to meet my financial commitments. And then there are those who are saying, I'm going to consider working from home. And there are so many other issues in between. Talk to us a bit about the emotional health of persons as we face this new normal.
Well, I think you've highlighted a very important issue, that is the diversity. Everybody's going to have their own unique needs and perceptions and perspectives. One of the things we have to look at, therefore, is how those of us who are in the same households, communities, workspaces, negotiate the fact that we are going to be having a different set of needs, perhaps from those who we are around and even those we care about. So there are two issues going on there. One, being aware of what is going on in your mind, being aware of what is triggering you, being aware of the assumptions you're making, your automatic thinking, all the things that seem so natural that you're going to have to walk back a bit and rethink, because everything has changed. And then there's a component of course, negotiating and compromising in your relationships to ensure that your differences don't lead to more conflict and more adversarial relationships than necessary. Yeah. Everybody's going to be different and everybody's going to have different needs, but it begins with self-awareness and insight. And then, of course, all the coping strategies, the taking the time out, pressing the pause button to try and find out what is going on with you, doing your meditation, your deep breathing, and also on a more practical level, thinking realistically and strategically about what all these changes imply. We're not going to go back to some of the old norms anytime soon. With no vaccine and with antibody tests that will not tell you if you are currently COVID-free. It can tell you that you were infected in the past. It can tell you that you had antibodies or that you didn't have any antibodies. But it can't tell if you have no antibodies right now necessarily. Yeah. So you could have been infected and test negative. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, with all the testing, which is just being developed, we're going to have to be very careful about how we calibrate what we think is a risk, and how we see ourselves perhaps as a risk to other people. So that, since you can't tell by looking, we have to consider that everybody around us could have the virus, and that we ourselves could have it. That means that, shaking hands, we can't have that casual contact again for now until we have that vaccine, and that could be months away. Some are hoping by the end of this year, others are saying another year and a half or two or even more. And as I said, sadly with HIV, there still isn't one.
Yeah, but Dr. Weller, that takes a major shift, doesn't it? I think people were thinking, by June things are going to be back to normal, and now we're seeing this is not something that's going to be changing in the near future. And you're saying that even as a social person, human beings are social animals, really. So we're looking
and we want that social contact.
Exactly. So we're looking at a shift in mindset in order to trigger a shift in behavior, and that is not necessarily a very easy thing to come to being, really.
I don't know if you're hearing me, Lisa, but I've lost your sound.
Are you hearing me? Dr. Weller, are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you now, yes.
Yes, I was saying that the shift that is required. Yes. Talk to me about the shift that is required, both mentally and, well, we know what we're talking about physically, but in terms of shifting a mindset, let's talk a bit about that.
Well, the mind is designed to organize information to protect you. That's the main purpose of the mind, to integrate all the perceptions, to organize them in such a way to ensure that we survive. And so it is natural, therefore, to want to try to find ways to protect yourself. But there's also another stabilizing function of the mind, which is to try to keep yourself calm and to enjoy pleasure. Really, it's a pleasure principle.
Yeah.
So what we have to be very careful of, each of us, is to have a balance between those two, not to get too scared and paranoid over what is going on, but also to be realistic. Now, what that means is that we have to be very careful about what we attend to. what information we take in. If we tend to be scared and hyper vigilant and stuff, we may want to feed ourselves with a lot of information about risk and data and conspiracy theories, etc., etc. If we tend to be the ones who want to try to keep things calm and manageable, then we might avoid that information and stick to just certain channels or certain facts that help us to feel like things will be okay. And unfortunately, it's somewhere in between. It's a scary time, and we have to be very mindful and therefore very purposeful and intentional with what we're doing. And again, therefore, how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to understand yourself and your triggers and your issues, and then you have to purposefully choose strategies to try to manage your information intake and ensure that your responses and the choices you make are intentional and not just automatic, not just based on the fear principle or the pleasure principle, but really responding to the facts, the science, and what you need to do. And it's not easy because, you know, we're all at different ages and stages. Genders are different. It means that we have to also do a lot of talking with each other to try to see where we stand on various things. I think, you know, we can support each other if we talk, but one of the dangers is that we tend to talk to people who agree with us and reinforce the mindset we have. So, you know, the people who want to lime will tend to talk to the people who want to lime, and then they'll all end up on Areopita or wherever else. And unfortunately, that is when the social contact will increase, especially under the use of liquor and other substances. And then you have a risk of an increase infection rate, increased incidence and prevalence. We're very blessed right now that we have in the English-speaking Caribbean a relatively low incidence and prevalence. And if we're able to manage our response, we will be able to keep it that way. But it's all about reprogramming our mind. You know, if we think about the computer and the tabs that we have open, the programs that we run, the programs that we download and we use a lot, we're going to have to step back and decide which of these are really healthy in terms of how our minds are working, and then make the appropriate changes.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, Dr. Weller, I think we have had a good conversation this morning. I always want to thank you so much for joining us and helping us to understand some of these issues. And sometimes we just have to keep, as you say, multiple messages to our community. That was Dr. Peter Weller, community clinical psychologist, and also recently appointed co-chair Disaster Mental Health Committee of Caribbean Alliance of the National Psychological Association. Thank you, Dr. Weller. And this has been
pleasure.
Coping with COVID. All right, so we are back right now, and we're going to take in a few messages. We still have so much more for you here on The Morning Show, so stay with us.